What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. This is a channel that explicitly talks about mental health through pop culture, and we introduce you to a couple cool flicks along the way. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and if I'm talking really fast, it's because I'm really excited to be talking about this movie. In fact, we're going to be doing a brand new episode about it this week, and we are talking about Cocaine Bear. So, translation from the beginning of the video, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. This is going to be just my general initial thoughts. We'll be talking about the longer, more horror themes and mental health tapestry woven within this upcoming Wednesday on our horror podcast, Abyss Gazing, where find it wherever you guys get your podcast form, or check the links in the descriptions below. Cocaine Bear tells the true-ish story of a lot of cocaine that gets dropped into a Georgia forest, and multiple paths cross, and a bear gets really, really high on cocaine and messes with all the people in its path. This movie absolutely sets the standard for a horror comedy in 2023. We are only 8 weeks into this year, and this could easily not only be one of the best comedies of the year, but also at the same time, like I said, it sets the golden standard for what the rest of horror comedy has to come up against the rest of the year. I loved every bit of this movie. And typically when it comes to reviewing comedies for this channel, it's one of the only genres I end up dreading, because of how comedy is subjective, and what makes one person laugh isn't necessarily going to make another person laugh. So there have been comedies in the past that I've reviewed on this channel that I'm just like, this didn't land with me. And then other people that I talk to later on are like, oh man, I laughed so hard at this moment. I'm like, I felt nothing. I feel like seeing this movie with a crowd really helped me kind of walk out of this movie and into this review a little bit more with confidence on my side. Because I'll be honest, I laughed so hard at this movie that I was literally crying. There were points in this movie where I just could not stop the tears from flowing. And yes, in the past couple of years, movies like The Whale and Pig have made me cry and have broken me. This movie is the first film that I've seen in a long time that is a comedy that actually made me cry because of how hard I was laughing. Jimmy Warden, who provides the script for Cocaine Bear, does a great job. In fact, which is really impressive considering this is only his second movie that he has written, the first of which being the Babysitter sequel for Netflix a few years ago, Killer Queen. Like, the jokes just really seem to land, and there are definitely parts in this movie where I feel like there's a point where I was supposed to laugh here, and just it didn't connect with me. And that's okay, because that's the genius of comedy as a genre, is that what connects with one person might not necessarily connect with the other person, and vice versa. There's always something for it to have here. I think walking into a movie titled Cocaine Bear, you don't expect there to be any kind of heart, and there is an immense amount of heart in here. I think a good portion of that heart comes from the relationship between Alden Ehrenreich and O'Shea Jackson Jr., who have a lot of friction in the beginning of this movie. Ehrenreich's character ends up, actually, it's kind of revealed early on in the movie that he's in mourning. He just recently lost his wife. I'll talk about that a little bit more later in the mental health moment. You guys start to see how those events kind of spiral and really shape their characters and grow their characters throughout, providing the film with surprisingly a decent amount of heart. I really liked their dynamic. I thought their dynamic together was something that was really significantly special. I'll be honest, by this point, I just rewatched Straight Outta Compton a couple days ago, and everything that I've ever seen O'Shea Jackson Jr. in, I mean, dude just knocks out of the park, has an immense range of talent as an actor, and Cocaine Bear is completely no different. Ehrenreich, on the other hand, I've only ever seen in solo, so to me, I think that he was a good companion for O'Shea, and I thought that the two of them worked really well off each other. And who could forget what a legacy to leave behind for Ray Liotta, going off in like the best way possible. I don't think Ray Liotta could have asked for a better career send-off. Of course, we lost the actor last spring. Liotta really carved out a legacy for himself playing these really intense characters in movies like Copland, Goodfellas, and probably a little bit on the softer side, but my favorite performance by him in Blow. He's not in this movie a whole lot, and yet you walk away from this movie knowing that it's dedicated to his memory, but also at the same time that he has a lot of energy, and I loved all of his scenes in this movie. I thought they were really fantastic. He plays a good subsidiary villain to the actual bear, who's terrifying, and talk about it in just a few minutes, but I thought Liotta really did leave a mark on this movie. This movie, in some ways, feels like a high-budget version of a movie that would play on Sci-Fi on like a Saturday night. Like, yes, it's campy, it's goofy, it's silly, but it has these qualities about it that really kind of make it rise above it. And I think one of the things that gives it that sci-fi feel, though, are the horror gags in this movie. And while I do cover a lot of horror, if you happen to stumble upon this and you're not familiar with what the term gag in horror means, it's basically just an industry term for kill. I think the gags work really well in this movie because for the first time that I've seen in a long time, there are gags in here that are, yes, they're creative because it's a bear doing all of the killing, but on the flip side of that, they actually land and lean into the humor of the movie, which for me, I find that is a real rarity where I can laugh at someone's leg falling off or someone being scratched. You know, just kind of some of the ridiculous things in here, and I'm really thankful that the horror aspect really leans into the comedy. Sometimes when it comes to horror comedies, you're going to have movies that lean too much into the horror and you're not laughing, or they lean too much into the comedy and you're not scared. Whereas I feel like for this, the general premise of a bear being high on cocaine is absolutely terrifying, especially the way that it's portrayed here. And when you mix in the comedy aspect, I think this film just balances itself really well. Sometimes I find myself as a cinephile and as a horrorphile torn between the worlds, because what means quality in the cinema world doesn't necessarily mean quality in the horror world, and vice versa. Showgirls is a perfect example of this, where Showgirls is presented as a movie that is not inherently a good movie, but it is a movie in my book that is good because of its badness. And that's kind of where I land with the CGI of this movie. Like, it's very painfully obvious that a lot of the elements of the kills and of the bear, of course, it all being CGI. And it looks noticeably bad in certain shots, but I also can't help but think that, man, this really lends into the charm of the aesthetic that they're trying to go for. This takes place in the 80s, and, well, this feels like an 80s B-movie slasher kind of film that you would find at a mom-and-pop video rental store, just with a higher budget. So, yeah. Let's run this through the Rorschach rating scale, and before I go ahead and review my final score for this movie, keep in mind that we will also be having a spoiler-filled discussion this upcoming Wednesday on Abyss Gazing. Links are in the show notes below. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, so that way you guys don't miss a spooky moment. And let me know in the comments below what you guys have thought about Cocaine Bear, if you guys have seen it. And I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 5 out of 5. I adored this movie all the way through. I had a smile on my face from the opening credits of this movie until the 2 post-credit scenes finished up in this movie. Absolutely 100%. This will end up for sure being one of my top 20 films, if not my top 5 favorite films of the year. This movie is just a riot, and I loved it through and through. Now let's talk about some mental health. If you guys are new to our content, a mental health moment is where we'll take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the character journey for Alden Ehrenreich is a man who just recently lost his wife. part of his character journey is actually looking at not only the proper and healthy way to grieve, but also at who you surround yourself with and call friends. See, here's something we never talk about when it comes to grief, is that grief really does not only test your own mental health, but the strength and the bond of the friendships and communities surrounding you. Now, don't get me wrong, you'll have people that'll say, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying about you, and they'll ask the questions like, hey, how are you doing? But the things that I am really trying to hone in on are the communities and the relationships that are actually getting down and wanting to do life with you. They're wanting to listen to you cry or vent or laugh with you or just sit in awkward silence with you. Now, while I do think the thoughts and prayers people, while they mean well and they might have stuff going on in their own lives, again, you're going to have people like that, and those people are fine. It's fine, but it's really the people that are going to surround you in the time of heartache and really get down in the trenches with you. One scene in particular captures this is where Alden Ehrenreich and Jackson Jr. are on the road together, and Jackson basically turns to Alden Ehrenreich and says, hey, look, man, I'm sorry I wasn't here for you, during this time, and really leans in and really expresses his heartache over not being there for his friend. That scene is pivotal and throughout the character journey of how their relationship intertwines together and how this singular event really impacts them all the way up into the second post-credit scene. And while I'm not going to say how the film ends, I will say that the through line of these characters really does demonstrate that there are going to be people there that really do care for you and really do want the best for you. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is make sure that you have a community that is going to surround you healthily and allow you to grieve in a respectful manner. Because at the end of the day, that's really what's going to help grief be as healthy as possible. I hope that was encouraging, and I hope that it really encouraged you to go see Cocaine Bear. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, links are in the descriptions below to check out our mental health resource library. And down there below, you'll also find links to all of our social media, podcasts on our podcast network, more movie reviews like this, our Patreon, and most importantly, that subscribe button. So until next week, keep remembering to keep the forest clean, and only you can prevent forest fires.